Hey everyone, welcome to this deep dive on building an online brand. You sent me those two articles, one from April 2024, and then the other one that doesn't have a date on it. And you really want to know, like, what are the biggest takeaways as you get started with your own brand? So get ready, because we're going to rethink some things.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me how both articles really emphasize the point that a strong online brand, these days it's essential. It's not just something that's like nice to have anymore. It really is a must have, whether you're an entrepreneur, a
Uh-huh.
freelancer, or even just someone who wants to kind of, make a statement, make their mark online.
Yeah, I was really struck by that too. But why is that? Is it just because everything's online now?
It's definitely more than that. I think it's because people online are just bombarded with so much information that it's really easy to get lost in all of that noise. So a strong online brand is what helps you cut through that. It's how people find you, remember you, and decide if they trust you enough to really engage with you.
Okay, that makes sense. So where do we even begin? Both articles mention brand identity as being like the foundation. So what exactly does that mean for someone who's just starting out?
It really is about creating this distinct and memorable image for your brand. Think of it as your online persona. So you want to make sure you have a really catchy name, a visually appealing logo, and a consistent style across all your platforms. All of those things are essential elements when we talk about brand identity.
So it's not just about having a pretty logo. It's about creating a cohesive visual experience.
Exactly. It's about giving people this clear and consistent understanding of who you are and what you stand for. And here's where I think it gets really interesting. In 2024 and beyond, authenticity is going to be more crucial than ever.
Okay, I've heard that word authenticity thrown around a lot. But what does it actually mean? Like when it comes to building a brand, is it just about being real?
You know, it is interesting how both sources really emphasize this, and I think it's directly tied to how savvy consumers have become. They can sniff out a fake brand a mile away, especially with all the tools and information they have at their fingertips to research companies and individuals.
Yeah, so you're saying people are doing their homework. They're not just blindly trusting brands anymore.
Exactly. They're looking for brands that are genuine, transparent, and true to their values.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But how do you actually convey that authenticity through your brand?
Well, it starts with being really clear about who you are and what you stand for. What are your core values? What makes your brand unique? And you mentioned that you're interested in reaching a younger demographic, right? This is going to be especially important to younger consumers. They can spot a phony a mile away.
Definitely. So it's about having a strong sense of self and then letting that shine through in every aspect of your brand.
Exactly. And that leads us to another really crucial aspect that both articles talked about, your brand story.
Oh, I love a good story.
Hmm.
But how does that play into building a brand?
Well, think about it this way. Would you rather buy from a faceless corporation or a brand that shares its origin story, its mission, its struggles, its triumphs?
I think I get it. You're saying a story makes a brand more relatable, more human?
Precisely. It creates this emotional connection that goes way beyond just a catchy tagline or a fancy logo. Think about a company like Tonomesh Shoes. Their brand story is woven into everything they do. They don't just sell shoes, they sell the idea of giving back. For every pair you buy, they donate a pair to a child in need. That's a powerful narrative that resonates with people.
Yeah, that's a great example. I'm starting to see how a story can really elevate a brand. So it's not just about what you sell, it's about why you sell it.
Exactly. And in 2024, consumers are even more drawn to brands with a purpose. They want to know what impact you're making, what social responsibility you're embracing. It's about aligning your values with your audience's values.
Okay, so we've talked about brand identity, we've talked about brand story. What about the actual content you create? I'm guessing that plays a huge role in shaping your online brand too, right?
Absolutely. Content is still king, as they say. But it's not just about churning out as much content as possible. It's about quality over quantity.
So what kind of content should you be creating? What resonates with audiences these days?
Well, it really depends on your target audience and your brand's overall message, but both sources stress that valuable, informative, and relevant content is key.
And it has to be engaging too.
Right.
No one wants to read boring content.
Exactly. And just like a good menu needs variety, so should your content. Think blog posts, infographics, video tutorials, even podcasts. The sources mention all those formats. They're really popular with audiences, and they keep things interesting.
Yeah, that's a great point about content strategy. And it actually ties in perfectly with what the articles say about social media. It's not enough to just create great content. You have to share it strategically.
You're absolutely right. Social media is a powerful tool for building your brand, but With so many platforms out there, it can be overwhelming to know where to even focus your efforts.
Yeah, where do you even begin with social media? I feel like there's a new platform popping up every week.
Well, that's where strategy comes in. When we talk about social media strategy, it's not just about posting randomly. You mentioned that you're interested in reaching a younger demographic, right? Well, using something like Instagram Reels or TikTok might be a better approach than, say, relying solely on Facebook posts. The sources mentioned those formats are pretty popular with that audience.
So it's about choosing the right platforms for your audience
Mhm.
and then tailoring your content to those platforms.
Exactly. And it's not just about the platforms themselves, it's also about how you use them. What kind of content are you sharing? How often are you posting? Are you engaging with your followers?
Okay, so there's a lot more to social media strategy than I initially thought.
There is. And it's important to remember that social media is constantly evolving. What works today might not work tomorrow.
So you have to be adaptable and willing to experiment.
Exactly. And that actually brings us to another point that both articles made that I found really interesting collaboration.
Oh, yeah. I remember reading about that. It wasn't just about putting yourself out there. It was about working with others. But what does that actually look like, when you're building your brand?
Well, think about like partnering with influencers or other brands that complement your own. It's a way to reach new audiences and build trust kind of through association.
Right. It's like getting a recommendation from a friend. If someone I trust, vouches for a brand, I'm way more likely to check it out.
Precisely. And it's not just limited to influencers and brands. You can also collaborate with your audience. Think about running contests or hosting those Q&A sessions or even just encouraging user-generated content.
So it's about creating a sense of community around your brand.
Absolutely. In 2024 and beyond, that sense of community is more important than ever. People want to feel like they're part of something, not just being sold to.
Yeah, it all comes back to that authenticity we were talking about earlier. People can tell when you're genuinely trying to connect versus just trying to make a quick buck.
You hit the nail on the head. And this is where all those pieces we've been discussing start to fit together. Your brand identity, your story, your content, your social media presence. All of that contributes to building a brand that people trust and want to be a part of.
This is so insightful. It's like we're putting together this puzzle, and each piece represents a different aspect of online brand building. But I have to be honest, it can feel a little overwhelming. Where do we even begin to put all of this into practice?
That's a great question. And both sources acknowledge that building a successful online brand, it is a journey. It's not a sprint. It takes time, effort, and a whole lot of patience.
So we need to be in it for the long haul. No overnight successes here.
Nope. But that doesn't mean you can't see results along the way. The key is to be consistent, persistent, and adaptable.
Adaptable. Tell me more about that.
Well, the digital landscape is constantly evolving, right? New
Yeah.
platforms emerge, algorithms change, trends come and go. So you need to be willing to adapt your strategy as needed.
Okay, so it's not about setting a plan in stone and sticking to it no matter what. We need to be flexible and adjust based on what's working and what's not. But how do we even know what's working?
That's where tracking your progress comes in. Both sources recommend using website analytics and social media insights to measure the effectiveness of your efforts.
So we're talking about looking at things like website traffic, social media engagement, all those fun metrics.
Exactly. By analyzing those metrics, you can see what's resonating with your audience, what's driving traffic, what needs to be tweaked.
It's like having a compass to guide us on this online brand building journey. We can course correct as needed to make sure we're headed in the right direction. This is all making so much sense now.
I'm glad to hear that. And remember, even with all the data and analytics in the world, building an online brand still requires a good dose of creativity and intuition.
Right. It's about finding that sweet spot between data-driven decision-making and that spark of inspiration that makes your brand truly unique. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today. From building a strong brand identity and crafting a compelling story, to creating engaging content and mastering the art of social media, it feels like we've explored just about every facet of building an online brand.
We have. And remember, it's all about finding what works best for you and your brand. There's no one-size-fits-all approach.
Exactly. Experiment, have fun, and don't be afraid to let your personality shine through. I think that's some of the best advice we can give.
I agree. Authenticity is key, remember.
Absolutely. Now, before we wrap up, I always like to leave our listeners with something to ponder. Both articles talked about diversifying your content, which we touched on earlier. But what are some unexpected ways you could diversify your content in 2024 to really stand out from the crowd?
That's a great question. It really depends on your brand and your target audience. But I think one thing to consider is incorporating more interactive content. Think quizzes, polls, games, even virtual reality experiences. The sources mentioned, those are on the
Oh,
rise.
I like that. It's about creating an experience, not just delivering information.
Exactly. And with the rise of AI and the metaverse, there are so many exciting possibilities for creating truly immersive and engaging content experiences.
That's incredible. So it's about thinking outside the box and pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Yeah, it sounds like the future of content creation is going to be pretty wild.
Yeah.
But even with all these new technologies emerging, I think those fundamentals of good storytelling and authentic connection, those will always be important, right?
Oh, absolutely. Those are timeless principles. And,
Right.
building a strong online brand, it isn't just about chasing the latest trends. It really is about building that solid foundation based on those core principles.
Right. It's about the long game. Speaking of which, I think it's time for us to start wrapping up this deep dive. But before we do, I want to make sure you walk away with some actionable insights.
Hmm.
So what are the key takeaways here? What are the things you absolutely need to remember when it comes to building your online brand?
I think one of the biggest takeaways is this shift toward authenticity and purpose we've been talking about. It's not enough to just have a pretty logo and a catchy tagline anymore. People really want to connect with brands that have a genuine story, brands that stand for something they believe in.
Yeah, it's about building a brand that people can trust and feel good about supporting. And I think that ties into the importance of building a community around your brand, right?
Absolutely. Fostering that sense of community is crucial. It's about engaging with your audience, building relationships, and creating a space where people feel connected to your brand and to each other.
So it's not just about broadcasting your message. It's about having a two-way conversation.
Exactly. And remember, building a strong online brand takes time and effort. It's a journey, not a sprint. Be patient, be persistent, and don't be afraid to experiment and adapt along the way.
I love that. Embrace the journey, learn from your mistakes, and keep evolving.
Speaking of evolution, both articles mention the importance of staying adaptable, in this ever-changing digital landscape. So what does that look like in practice?
It means keeping an eye on the latest trends, being willing to try new platforms and technologies, and not being afraid to kind of pivot your strategy as needed. The digital world is constantly changing, so you need to be able to adapt and evolve with it.
So stay curious, stay informed, and stay flexible.
Got it. Okay, I think we've covered just about everything. Any final words of wisdom before we sign off?
Just remember to have fun with it. Building a brand should be an enjoyable and fulfilling experience. Let your personality shine through. And don't be afraid to take risks.
That's great advice. All right, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive, but I hope you found it as insightful as I did. Until next time, happy branding.